The early 2000s is ripe with a lot of anime hidden gems, so I have come once again to bring you an anime from that era that barely anyone remembers or even talks about. This one in particular really carries the 2000s vibes on its shoulders, feeling like a cross between Trigun and Cowboy Bebop. I present you Gunsword, the sci-fi mecha western that, while it may be rough around the edges, does a lot to make itself a solid watch. An anime original that serves as something of a time capsule, peering back into the ways anime originals used to handle themselves all the way back then. So get toasty as we dive into this relic of the past. Gunsword is an anime original that was truly a product of its time. Releasing in the year 2005 and consisting of 26 episodes, it's an anime that really doesn't do a lot to make itself stand out. Dare I say, Gunsword isn't really unique in any way, but that doesn't mean it's bad or anything. It's definitely not generic by any means. It's a series that knew what it wanted to do from the start and stuck to that while providing quite the pleasant viewing experience. The anime had great characters, but where it really falls short is in its story and pacing in my opinion. The anime doesn't do a lot to fully utilize its 26 episode run, and that's a shame. It always teeters on the edge of being great but never quite crosses it. So let's dive into Gunsword proper and see why that is. Episode 1 opens up with our main character Van, a vagabond moving from town to town in search of a man whose most defining character trait is having a claw for a right hand. Aptly named, The Claw. Van has personal beef with The Claw. Why? Well, The Claw murdered his wife Elena on the day of their wedding, so Van is out to get revenge. Sporting a tuxedo implied to be the very same tuxedo he wore on his wedding day and a very big hat he's never seen without, Van arrives at the town of Evergreen, a town that has been plagued by bandits for 2 whole months. It's during one of these bandits' attacks where he meets and saves Wendy, our second main character. She takes him to the mayor who wants to hire him to get rid of all those bandits and act as a bodyguard, but Van doesn't seem all that interested in it. It's at that very moment when the bandits show up again, this time with their leader who calls himself Lucky. A man said to have incredible luck and has declared that he'll be launching a full-blown attack on the town tomorrow to take their banks safe. And to make things even more intense, he's got an armor. After his lavish display, the mayor desperately pleads Van to help them, but Van still isn't interested. Later that night, he heads on over to the bandits' bar to get some milk. Yeah, Van doesn't drink alcohol. Rather, he avoids it since it only takes a little bit for him to get drunk, so milk is his drink of choice anytime. He also has this weird and downright toe-curling quirk, where anytime he eats, he requests for all the condiments to be put onto his meal, which then turns them into this. This guy nukes his insides with every meal. So Van is forced to engage in a card game with Lucky. They take turns pulling cards and whoever pulls the joker loses. This is all to test his luck. It's during this game where we get to learn Lucky's ideology. To him, luck is the only thing guaranteed in life. Everything else is influenced by man, but luck? Nah, that's from God. And so every time he tests his luck, he's testing God. Lucky is a man with a lot of charisma and really stands out in the first episode. I would like to see more of him later on, but that wouldn't be the case. Van pulls out the joker and gets thrown out, but Van actually pulled a sneaky and pulled 2 cards, which meant Lucky would have been the one to pull the joker, which, seeing as he's a bandit, would have led to Van's untimely death. And Lucky is not pleased about this one bit. After this scene, Van is confronted by Wendy. She thinks Van is being unfair by choosing not to help the village despite being strong, but Van just tells her that's just how life is. Van isn't exactly a good person or a hero or justice out to save people. He's just a guy doing his own thing. Van doesn't believe in that with great power comes great responsibility type shit. He didn't have Spider-Man growing up. Wendy tries to persuade him further, even offering herself to be his bride, but Van, being someone with sense, says no. Van walks off but is immediately jumped by Lucky, who doesn't appreciate being made a fool of and guns him down, but Van survives this. The next day comes and as promised, the bandits launch their attack on the town led by Lucky and his armor. Wendy tries to stop him but fails woefully, and just as the bandits are about to wreck up the whole place, Van appears. He had no intentions of stepping in, but for Wendy's sake, he decided to stop them. He whips out a cool sword that transforms from cloth and takes out the bandit goons. Lucky, not wanting to be stopped, hops onto his armor, and this is when Van reveals the coolest thing up his sleeve. Using his sword, he summons an armor that descends from the sky, the armor called Dan of Thursday. He goes on to then mess Lucky up and take down his armor effortlessly, and after the dust settles, Van and Wendy question the bandit leader. Wendy all this time has been in search for her brother who was taken a couple weeks back. Turns out the bandit sold him off to the Claw who wanted him specifically. Upon hearing that the Claw was involved, Van becomes enraged and the expressions on his face are so raw. Van is always seen with a blank, tired and deadpan look on his face, rarely ever expressing any kind of emotion, but the moment the Claw is involved, it's like he becomes an entirely different person. The episode ends with Van moving on to the next town, this time being accompanied by Wendy. Seeing as they're both after the same person, it only makes sense for them to go together, something Van isn't exactly sold on, and thus begins their journey together. The first episode of Gunsword serves as a strong start for the series. Unfortunately, it doesn't really carry that energy moving into the rest of the episodes. While the first episode brings a lot of tension, stakes and actions to the situations our protagonist finds himself in, the episodes that follow it are pretty tame in comparison. They just don't hit like episode 1, and this is thanks to the episodic nature of the series. Because of the way the anime is structured, you'll be able to see each episode's pattern as clear as day. The episodes after the first take a more calmer tone, which might actually put a lot of people off from the series. If you try to judge the series based on the 3-episode rule, you would most likely be dropping it. Most episodes are, for the most part, self-contained and don't really build on each other, which causes the pacing to take a massive hit for it. Here's how they go. Van and Wendy arrive at a new town, we get introduced to a new person who will become a recurring character, the new town has some kind of problem, Van has no desire in helping that town with its problem, he somehow gets roped into it, does a bit of fighting, summons his mech to fight the mech of the week, and everything is fixed. And then we get breadcrumbs about the Claw and the supposed direction he was heading next. Rinse and repeats for like 60% of the series. One of the driving forces that kept me going was finding out who the Claw was and what his relationship with Wendy's brother would be. And while the reveal was great, it comes at the midpoint of the series, which you'll have to slog through. I'll get more into that when we reach there, but for now we'll have to see what comes before that. In episode 2, our main characters arrive at a city built on a bridge. It's where they meet the information broker Carol Mendoza, or as people call her, Carmen 99. They want to cross over to the next town but can't cause borders are closed, so they have to wait. Long story short, the mayor of that town kidnaps a bunch of women, Carmen and Wendy included, to take along on a massive armor with the intention of abandoning the city and starting a new civilization with them. The mayor and his guards all have the ability to control their bears like weapons. How? Who fucking knows, but they do. Van gets in their way, summons his armor and puts a stop to them. They find a bit of info on the Claw but nothing solid and move on to the next town. In episode 3, our characters arrive at a diner in a Mexican themed town. A diner with a bunch of rowdy old men who spend most of their time there. They call themselves the Five Amigos and they were basically a Sentai team back in their younger years, but now all they do is reminisce about the past and their 5th member who passed away. The old men crew are pretty energetic and fun to watch. There's this one guy who just sleeps throughout everything. The town's peace is then interrupted when a paranoid shut-in finally tweaks out and releases a massive armor to wreak havoc on the town. The Five Amigos spring into action one last time to face him off, and with a bit of assistance from Van, they fight off the armor and save their town. This episode was one of my favorite because there was just a lot of heart put behind it, and the wackiness of the Five Amigos and their armor made it even better. Episode 4, however, is one of the more forgettable ones. Van has suddenly fallen sick on their way to the next town, and due to sudden rain, they have to take shelter in a cave somewhere. Wendy, seeing Van in pain, sets out on her own to the nearest town to find the doctor and get some medicine for him. The most important thing we learn from this episode is the fact that Van and Dan are linked on a much deeper level. His armor also acts as some kind of healing pod that recovers him to top condition anytime he rides it. And if he goes days without riding it, he falls sick, which is exactly what is happening in this episode. This episode is also a great display of Wendy's dedication to helping Van, and I gotta say, it was a good character moment for her. The episode ends with the appearance of a gunslinger who is also in search of the Claw, but it doesn't take too long before we learn more about him. Episode 5 has our heroes stumble across a high-tech town in a cave where everyone is seemingly a twin of the other, down to the animals. The people here have been locked in a power struggle for years, trying to settle their disputes with duels that always end in draws. Carmen shows up to serve as the middleman to referee their latest duel, on which Van would be participating in, going up against the mystery man from before who we learn is named Ray. The two men act as representatives for each of the opposing sides, which are led by identical twins who are the daughters of the now deceased leader of the town. They are fighting to acquire the other half of a key that opens a massive door to their father's inheritance. Ray, just like Van, is a man out to get revenge on the Claw for killing his wife, so the two are very similar in a lot of ways, but they don't see eye to eye on the way they carry out things and become rivals of sorts. Long story short, chaos breaks out with one of the twins getting their hands on the other half's key and unlocking the door, only to find out their father's inheritance was an armor that required two people to operate. The two also find out that everyone in their town were actually clones, and this was part of a sick experiment carried out by the Claw. So Van has to team up with Ray to take down the armor, which results in the town's destruction. This episode was pretty dark, so as a palate cleanser, the next one following it is quite the opposite in tone. Van and Wendy end up in a tropical town and get into Team Rocket type antics with a couple madly in love with each other who want to take down Van and get his armor to sell off. Throughout the episode, they constantly get in the way of Van and Wendy, who are just trying to get a meal. It's goofy and unserious, but towards the end we find out the girl is actually the daughter of the local mafia boss who tries to kill the guy, so Van reluctantly swoops in to save them despite all the annoyance they've caused him. The episode ends with our main characters finding out that the Claw and Wendy's brother were just in the restaurant the two were in and left moments ago, enraging Van. Building off that last episode, episode 7 immediately has our characters hot on the trails of the Claw, getting stuck in the ocean with the ship they were on breaking down. The ship crew has them take a boat to the nearest island and unbalance them there. This is when they meet the owner of the island, Joe, who invites them over to his mansion. Over the course of the episode, we find out Joe is actually a follower of the Claw who tries to misdirect and gaslight them into giving up their chase for the man, tempting them with simpler lives. But Van's hatred is too strong for the Claw and locks the fuck in, stealing his resolve on wanting to put an end to the Claw. The two have their massive mech fight resulting in the death of Joe, who doesn't give any new information about the Claw and dies being glad he brought his leader some time. Episode 8 introduces us to Joshua, who Van and Wendy meet while trying to cross a mountain range which has become the territory to a giant dragon-like armor. Joshua reveals to us that he's actually Ray's brother and desperately wants to bring his brother back home. The brother, who just so happens to be at the same mountain range too. The two brothers meet, but Ray has no intentions of coming back until he gets his revenge, but unfortunately the characters can't make any progress past the range because of the Mecha dragon, so Van and Ray make a temporary truce to team up and take the dragon down and question the one piloting the mech since his armor is related to the Claw somehow. The two armor riders successfully defeat the Mecha dragon but find out the pilot has been dead for ages, with the armor itself running on autopilot. But all isn't lost as they are able to get the mech stayed aboard. Van and Ray fight over it before Ray ultimately ditches the whole thing and leaves, bidding farewell to his younger brother who he doesn't want following him. This episode ends with the two of them moving on to the next town, but this time with Joshua tagging along. I really liked Joshua as a character. He brought some much needed good vibes to the crew, balancing out Van's aloofness and Wendy's serious facade with his oblivious goofiness. Also, I'm not sure if this was intentional by the writers of the anime, but he feels very autism coded. Having a hyperfixation on machines, can't seem to read room or people, and can't seem to pick up on social cues, as well as saying the first thing that comes to his mind without a second thought. He was a really fun character to watch. Episode 9 is a Carmen-centric episode. The now trio of characters run into Carmen yet again and find themselves at her hometown, a place she doesn't seem all that keen returning to. The only reason they're there is so that they can meet a renowned data analyst who might be able to crack the data board they got in the previous episode. This is also where Carmen reconnects with her childhood friend Hayata and her father, who is the aforementioned data analyst. The crew just hang around town while they wait for the data. Carmen gets nostalgic about her childhood, reminiscing about her dad and the good old days. It's thanks to her dad that she herself is an information broker now, cause he was one too. She also has some kind of friction with Hayata, who we find out has been growing some pretty dangerous flowers that are able to cripple the body of people exposed to the pollen without the proper antibodies. She's doing all of this in service of the Claw. Carmen goes on to confront her about it, and this is when they lay their honest emotions bare to each other. The two expressed how much they loved and hated each other since childhood. Despite the fact they were close, they harbored animosity towards each other. Carmen hated her for how much she pitied her and how her parents were still alive after hers passed away. Hayata hated her for how much attention her brother gave her and for leaving town, the two ending things on a pretty somber tone. Her father, in a last-ditch effort to atone for the sins of his daughter, hands Van the data board he wasn't able to fully crack before setting their house on fire with him and their research in it. And Hayata, in an attempt to take responsibility for her actions, sets her vast garden with those dangerous flowers ablaze, truly losing everything she ever had. The episode ends on quite the sad tone as our characters move on to the next town. This, to me, was the episode with the most emotional weight behind it so far. I think because of how self-contained it was able to really go into the emotions behind it. Dedicating the entire episode to Carmen, who up until now hadn't had much screen time, was great cause it made her a lot more relatable. It's the character-focused episodes like these that show just how great the character writing is in the anime. It's just a shame that the slow pacing brings it down a lot, cause at the halfway point of the anime, the writing really picks up and it creates such a stark contrast to the previous episodes that you can't help but feel like the previous episodes were mostly just filler. The anime feels like it was designed for TV broadcasting first and telling a story second. This becomes really apparent in the way the story is structured. My guess is that they wanted a lot of standalone episodes so that you could hop in at any moment and could be technically watched in any order while still slowly building up its overarching narrative. Hell, some of the episodes go by without any real plot development. If we were to condense all the plot related stuff, this would have been like a 13 or 14 episode series instead of the 26. But I guess the longer episode count gave us more time to spend with the characters, which were the best part about it. Episode 10 has our characters arrive at one of the coolest towns yet. It's a town that got half of itself resting at the bottom of the ocean due to some natural disaster that happened decades ago, so now people flock to the town to dive and scavenge for relics. Van, Wendy and Joshua, however, are only passing by, or they would have if not for their train getting attacked by pirates, leading to all the tracks being on lockdown. In order to kill time, they take up a job working as bodyguards for a group of divers who need protection from pirates as they reel in a massive haul. I say they, but it's mostly Van who does the guarding with his armor. Van does his job and faces the pirates who show up as expected to stop the haul. It's a battle against some really dramatic pirates on the water that proves to be difficult for Van at first, but he's able to pull through in the end. They successfully defend the container, get paid, and as an added bonus are able to hop on the same train it's being transported in, which just so happens to be the very next city they're heading to rendezvous with Carmen, who went ahead with the data board to look into it. This episode ends with them arriving at their destination and a major plot reveal. Standing at the opposite platform from Wendy, she sees her brother Michael, the one she's been searching for all this time. The next episode immediately picks up with her finally meeting her brother again, but he doesn't seem all that happy to see her. This is when he tells her he has no intention of going back to their hometown and she should just stop following him. Looks like all this time, Michael wasn't kidnapped but was willingly following the Claw, who he calls his comrade. Michael thinks highly of the Claw and it doesn't feel like brainwashing. It appears Michael truly does believe in whatever ideals and grand scheme the Claw has and has become a devout follower of his, berating his sister for coming all the way to look for him. She takes the gun he kept with her as a memento of him, throws it away and tells her to never come looking for him ever again, breaking her heart. On the other side of things, Van runs into a strange group of people who don't feel like they're just average people. Turns out, they're all followers of the Claw. There's Wu, Gadaved, Faslina, and the twins Melissa and Carosa. They've all convened at some bunker facing the very container Van had to defend from pirates in the last episode. They exchange a few words while waiting for their final member, who is none other than Michael. The 6 gathered here call themselves the Original 7, and the massive container they had shipped to them contained an inactive armor called Saudade of Sunday. Cutting back to Van, he's met up with Wendy again, who tells him about the encounter she had with her brother. Van is pissed at this, equal parts cause Wendy didn't get her brother back and because she didn't get any information on the Claw. Van is a pretty dense and aloof guy who isn't all that emotionally mature. Because of the amount of trauma he carries in his heart, he's closed himself off from the people around him, which is why he can't really understand other people's feelings, or rather never tries to, and it's also why he has such a nonchalant attitude. To him, up until meeting Elena, his wife, he's always been alone, living day to day and not knowing what tomorrow would bring. And this is the same attitude he's carried throughout the anime. So Wendy, distraught about her current situation, tries to find some comfort in Van, the man she's been traveling with for months now. She asks him what she's supposed to do now, a bit of her hoping Van would be able to give her some kind of pep talk, but he gives it to her straight and tells her to go home. And so, with a look of utter defeat, she leaves. This was such a good episode because it goes against whatever expectations you'd have going into it. Finding out that Michael had willingly followed the Claw was shocking, and learning that he's part of the bad guy's top dogs was even cooler. But my heart goes off to the moments between Van and Wendy. Van bluntly telling her to go back home like that was brutal. You'd think that because of the time they spent together, Van would have seen her as something of a friend, and at this point gave her some kind of hard-boiled motivational speech about getting her brother back by force, but nope, he goes against a lot of the general protagonist cases we've come to know. In fact, Van is a selfish asshole most of the time, and he kind of remains that way throughout the anime. He isn't fighting to protect anyone or for world peace, all he wants is revenge and doesn't care if the world goes to shit before he gets his revenge. In my eyes, he's so damn cool. Looks like this might be it for our ragtag group, so they all split up. Not Joshua though. He meets Wendy to try to get her to stay and continue her search. He's talking from one younger sibling to the other, and his words really do resonate with her, but she still hesitates. It appears she needs one final push. Meanwhile, Van, frantically searching crowds for the Claw, encounters Godved, who is actually an old acquaintance of his. Godved leads him away from the crowd to talk to him one-on-one. Through a flashback, we find out that Godved was there 3 years ago when the Claw attacked. Van, just barely holding on to life, begs Godved to reconstruct him. This operation is what will help him be able to pilot Dan of Thursday. It appears that Van's connection to Dan is what is keeping him alive. This is also why Van fell sick all the way back in episode 4, because he frequently needs to hop into Dan to restore himself. And also Dan needs to link with Van because it's through their link that Dan is able to regenerate when back in the satellite. And finally, 12 episodes into the series, we get some kind of lore dump. Godved wants Van to join the original 7, or rather the new original 7. The previous ones were all killed by Godved himself. The original 7 were a group of people who piloted 7 unique armors, all named after days of the week. Armors that, when summoned, dropped down from space satellites orbiting the planet. These armors and satellites were all made on Earth and acted as surveillance systems to monitor this planet, Endless Illusion, which was originally a prison planet. But then as the years went by, the Earth got destroyed and the original 7 became more and more corrupt, drunk on their own power, which is why they had to be killed. And now Godved is here to get Van to join the original 7 since he's quite literally the only one who can pilot the armor. But Van doesn't care. To him, his second lease on life has only one purpose, and that is to kill the Claw, which Van finds out immediately that the new original 7 are people who serve the Claw. Van, upon hearing this information, switches up and is all hands. Godved takes those hits like an absolute tank. The two decide to take things outside and bring down their armors. Van piloting Dan of Thursday and Godved piloting Diablo of Monday. Before we get into their fight proper, we cut back to Wendy, who has come across a nice old man. The two take a moment to talk, and this is when she airs out her feelings to this random old man. Wendy is frustrated at her weakness. To her, that meeting with her brother put a lot into perspective for her. In her eyes, she hadn't really grown all that much since she left town in search for her brother. She sees herself as immature, being unable to act when the moment really called for it. And it's been reflective of her journey up until this point. She's desperately tried to act way more mature than she is so that others wouldn't treat her like a kid, but that usually resulted in her just coming off as even more immature. But now she understands that she really didn't know what she was doing and feels like everything she's done up to this point was for nothing. The old man goes off on a speech talking about life and how fleeting it is, adding that life itself doesn't mean all that much. Instead, what's meaningful is what our lives give birth to, which are the dreams we have. And it's people with strong dreams and aspirations that are able to keep on living. He asks Wendy that perhaps she really isn't that sad that her brother left her, but rather jealous that he has found a dream he's willing to carry out to the end. He also adds that because she's had a one-sided dream, she isn't able to understand her brother and instead should strive to have a similar dream to her brother. Because dreams inherently cause conflict with one another, so the best way for everyone to get along is to share the same dream. A dream so big that they don't mind risking their lives for it. And his words actually resonate with Wendy, and wanting to learn more about him, she asks about his dream. His dream is for a world where everyone can live without unhappiness, where everyone is truly peaceful. If the red flags weren't bright enough, it is immediately revealed that this unassuming old man is in fact the Claw. But before he can do anything, Ray pulls up, packing heat and rains bullets down. The Claw is unamused by his appearance. In fact, he can't even remember who Ray is. It takes Ray summoning his armor Volcane to jog his memory. The Claw tells him that, hey, yeah, like I killed your wife and all, but that was in support of my dream, so when you really think about it, she's not truly dead but lives on inside me, which means you can't really avenge someone who is alive, so your dream of killing me doesn't make any sense. The amount of mental gymnastics the Claw goes through is an art form. Ray tries to use his mech to smoke the Claw, but Michael, in the armor Saudade, cuts in at the last moment to save his comrade and take them all away. Meanwhile, Van has been dueling Godved and he's getting washed. Ro is getting flung around like a rag doll. This is the first time we see Van getting handled like this. Up until now, every fight that he's been in were the fights he was able to handle with relative ease. But now seeing him getting handled like this makes you realize that his previous opponents were quite low level enemies. In the midst of the fight is when Godved reveals that he was the one that led the Claw to Van's wedding, meaning that he had a hand, or should I say a claw, in killing his wife. They fight some more before Van catches a glimpse of the escaping Claw. The sight of him flips a switch. We see Van make expressions we've never seen him make. He's locked in now. And so he ends the fight with one big clash, killing Godved. In his final moments, all he can do is wish he shared the same dream with Van. The episode ends with Wendy digging through the rubble to find her brother's pistol and making it her own, symbolizing her desire to move forward, no longer clinging on to the dreams her brother left her with. It's also where she meets Van again, the two now having a much better understanding of each other and need no words, walking into the next dawn. These past episodes were great. It introduces all the antagonists that will be pushing the plot forward in the second half of the anime and shows us just what our ragtag group of vagrants will be getting themselves into. I especially loved the Claw. His introduction was great and his whole monologue about dreams and the future were chilling to listen to. The Claw basically has that shonen protagonist mindset taken to its psychotic extreme. He's a man who thinks he's doing nothing bad and helping humanity find happiness. And if it means killing people for the greater good of humanity, so be it. What makes him even better is that throughout the time he's on screen, he presents himself as a calm and soft-spoken guy who doesn't have an inch of malice in him, and you never see him express anything but joy on his face. Not in like a crazy psychotic way, but in a way that oddly makes you feel at ease. That is a great antagonist right there. So with the past couple of episodes greatly advancing the plot, you'd think the second half of the anime continues this energy. But unfortunately, the next episode immediately after this is about an armor tournament our characters enter in order to win some extra cash. Nothing all that big comes from it except from the introduction of a new character named Priscilla, a young girl who has her very own armor and seems to have a mild crush on Van. We'll be seeing more of her later. This episode's placement feels awkward because it's sandwiched right between two plot-heavy episodes, but at the same time, I can see what they were going for. This episode acted as a transition to past time as the next two episodes are heavily focused on Van as a character and drive the overall story forward. Besides, the episode wasn't all that bad and Priscilla was a great addition to the cast, so I can't really complain. Episode 15 has Van and Wendy continued their journey. Joshua was left behind to recover from a gunshot wound he got back when his brother confronted the Claw, so the two take an airship to the next rendezvous point. And as they pass time, Van reminisces about the past, his time training with Dan and his time spent with Elena and meeting Godved. Their trip gets cut short by one of the original seven, a man by the name of Wu, who shoots down their airship to request a duel with Van, and Van, not being one to back out of a fight, faces him. Wu pilots Mecha of Tuesday and faces Van with relative ease. Once again, Van is up against someone who outclasses him in every way, and Wu doesn't play around. He calls Van out on how he's changed in the past and how he's done nothing but fool himself into thinking he's some fearless badass who has no emotion. And those words strike a chord with Van, who is absolutely stricken with fear. It's this moment of hesitation that leads to Van's defeat. For the first time in the series, Van takes an L, but Wu doesn't just kill him right there. Instead, he declares that in 3 days he'll come back to kill him. Why? Because he's the main character. Wendy is able to get Van out of the defeated mech and take shelter in an abandoned town. Because of the snow and the cold, Wendy does come down with a fever, so now Van has to be the one to take care of her, mirroring that time she took care of him. Throughout that time though, Van is stricken with PTSD. It doesn't help that Mecha stands atop a castle menacingly overlooking Van, reminding him of his utter defeat. Wu is a weird man. He sits all alone in that castle lamenting about his mother and chastising his father. Turns out he's actually the Claw's illegitimate child, and Wu hated how much his mother revered him. It appears that he had very particularly strong feelings about his own mother, and as a child, driven by jealousy, he tried to kill the Claw, but his mother got in the way and died for him. Wu is someone who wasn't 100% on board with the comrade's plans because of the love he had for his mother, but now he's casting her aside to fully devote himself to the Claw. Van on the other hand has been on edge ever since. He's paranoid and can't seem to think straight. With their 3 days of grace ending tomorrow, Van wants to run away to avoid the battle altogether. He wants to take Wendy and leave before tomorrow. This is when she shows some great character development. She tells him to go on without her. She has no intentions of running and is ready to face whatever comes head on. She may not be able to do much, but she's not going to run. This is proof of her determination to see her dreams till the end. Van on the other hand doesn't really have any dreams. This is when he confides in her. He tells her about his past and how he was born alone, never knowing who his parents were and living each day as it came with no real dreams or ambitions. His only concerns were figuring out what his next meal would be. And when he was kicked down, he'd get back up and beat down whoever got in his way. To him, it was a simple life, one he didn't really need to think all that much about. That was until he met Elena, whose kindness made him realize just how miserable his life had been. Just being around her made him want to change and to be a better person for her. All he ever wanted was to be by her side, to live with her till the end. But the Claw took that away from him. The Claw took away his dream. Finally letting out all he's been bottling up, we see him undoing all the development before he met Elena and choosing to run. Choosing to do nothing but exist. And Wendy tells him to go. She's not going to pressure him to continue or blame him for running, but she's not going to stop moving forward. She's determined to see if the path she chose to follow is the right one and is ready for whatever waits for her in the end. Van leaves to have some time to himself. He reminisces about Elena, accepting that the person he is today is because of her. She sacrificed himself to save him, and now is alive thanks to her. She is Van's dream, and she lives on inside him. This realization reinvigorates him. Screaming at the top of his lungs his love for Elena, Van is finally ready to face Wu and Mecha again. Van's second wind makes him realize he's been controlling the armor inefficiently, and for the first time he fully synchronizes with it, bringing the beat down on Mecha. Van is able to come out on top, killing him and claiming victory, proof of the power of his love. The Claw, upon hearing the death of his own son, seems pretty indifferent about it. He's like, oh well, we have a backup anyway. Seems like the second death of an original 7 member doesn't mean all that much to the guy. Truly a man evil to the core. With a great episode diving into Van's mentality, the next one immediately follows it up with a swimsuit episode filled to the brim with a lot of fan service. Van and Wendy finally reunite with the rest of the gang, but some old faces are here now. The 5 amigos are back, Joshua is here again, and so is Priscilla, bringing along a fancy new hover base that will serve as the base of operations for our characters as they make their way towards the Claw. The crew have to make it through a city that is exclusive only to women and is led by a queen who sees swimsuits as the pinnacle of human clothing. Okay. So their plan is to kidnap her and have her give them access to the docks so that they can head to the next location. There is a lot of fan service here, which isn't what I was expecting, but it wasn't all that bad. The episode was also pretty hilarious. The next episode, episode 18, is one that mainly focuses on the Claw, Michael, and their base of operations. Michael has finally fully linked with Saudade, which means it's finally time for them to move on to the next phase of their plans. But meanwhile, it appears some of the researchers aren't fully on board with the Claw's plans. The ambiguity of the plans has caused a few of them to become skeptical of the man, and so these select few make plans to stage a rebellion to try and get Michael on board, taking advantage of the relationship he had with them since they were the ones overseeing his armor training. He's not on board and so they take him hostage. They confront the Claw and the man, as always, has nothing but a calm demeanor on his face, even when the life of the one who's the most important to his plans is in danger. He casually walks up to them in a way that just puts them at ease. Hell, one of them even starts believing what he's saying. This lets him casually walk up to one of them and hug him to death. And the Claw is actually heartbroken by this and cries real tears over the man, vowing not to let his life go to waste and fulfill his dream no matter what. The rest of the failed rebellion try to escape via a dragon mech, but they are stopped by Michael and Saudade. They don't stand a chance as Saudade shows off his magnificence and rips them into pieces, proving his dedication to the Claw. While all this was going on, the main characters have found a secret underground express tunnel that leads them directly to the Claw's base of operations, so determined to finish things, they continue their journey. 3 days pass as they make their way through the tunnel. In that time, there isn't much to do. Priscilla tries to flirt with Van but is unsuccessful, and Wendy shows hints of jealousy at how chummy she is with him. And just as the crew are killing time, they get attacked by dragon armors, so the 5 amigos and Priscilla troop out to fight them and keep them busy to let the rest of the characters go on. And as they continue, they immediately get jumped by the twins Carosa and Melissa, piloting their own original 7 armors. Carosa pilots Sin of Friday, and Melissa pilots Sen of Saturday. Their armors have the unique gimmick of having the ability to quickly combine and separate at a moment's notice. They're quite tricky to deal with, but Ray shows up to back up our heroes. Turns out he's been secretly tracking and following them through his armor that uses a massive drill to transport itself underground. The twins are actually pretty formidable opponents, giving both Van and Ray a lot of trouble, but Carosa, being a hot-blooded child, begins to lose his cool. The only reason he set out to fight Van is because of how jealous he was of the Claw constantly praising Michael. He wanted to prove himself to the Claw because he was afraid of being seen as useless and getting cast aside, and so dragged his sister into all this, who honestly didn't want to get into all the fighting but did because of the love she has for her brother. His insecurities cause him to drop his guard. Ray is able to fire off a high energy rifle directly at him, but his sister gets in the way, dying in the process. With her last words, she begs her brother to stop and just go back. There is nothing to fight for anymore. But he can't. He's come too far and is too afraid he won't be forgiven by their comrade. Enraged, he tries to go after the hover base and Joshua directly. Ray, in order to protect his brother, fires another shot, killing the boy and putting an end to this episode. Wow, this episode was kind of sad but also pretty enjoyable. Credit to the anime, it lets us understand these characters a lot more without the use of dedicating time to their backstories. Like the twins, for example, we don't need to know where they came from or what life they had before they met the Claw, but instead, we're able to get a grasp of their characters and motivations from their actions alone. It does a lot to elevate them with the very little screen time they get, and in the end you almost feel bad for them when they die. This only goes to show you how ruthless the Claw is. He's not above letting children operate weapons of destruction if it means he gets to achieve his dream. To him, this was a sacrifice they were fated to make. So after that fight, the crew make a brief pit stop to recover and fix up their mechs. While all this is going on, the Claw makes preparations for his plan, which he calls the Time of Happiness. While the crew are having a moment of respite, Wendy is met by her brother and Fasolina. They aren't here to fight but just to talk to Wendy. Michael tries to talk her out of continuing her journey, but she's intent on not stopping. He begs her to come with him. He knows the kind of danger she'll be getting into if they continue, so he wants to be the one to protect her. She's a bit conflicted about it. After Wendy met the Claw all the way back then, she's been facing her own internal struggles trying to figure stuff out for herself. She's not a fan of conflict and wonders if there's really a way for people all around to coexist in peace and happiness without violence. Sharing the same dream, to paraphrase. And seeing her brother reach out to her like this, showing nothing but confidence in the Claw's plans, makes her even more conflicted about the whole thing. But before Wendy can say anything, the rest of the crew show up to interrupt them. And this is when Fasolina reveals that the Claw actually has a fatal illness that'll kill him sometime soon. And his plans involve using the flowers they acquired from Carmen's hometown all the way back then. However, before he dies, he plans on using those flowers to reformat the world, creating something that will strip people of their individuality and give them the same ideals as the Claw, and if everyone is the same, they won't have desires for violence and so they'll live together sharing one happiness. A plan he intends to carry out even if it costs him his life, using something called the birthday system. Seeing as no one side is ready to listen to the other, Fasolina gets on the offensive, summoning her armor, Dahlia of Wednesday. Her goal is simply to stall the crew as Michael heads back to begin preparations for the Claw's next phase. Once again, Van is faced with an enemy who just barely outclasses him. Dahlia is agile and nimble, making it hard for Van to actually catch her. And of course, she's operated through pole dancing. Can you just imagine how funny it would be if it was a guy that was stuck with this armor in the first place? She's able to do her job well, keeping Van at bay as the Claw begins the next stage of his plan, which is launching Saldad and Michael into space. With a timer counting down, our heroes scramble to make it to the launch base. Van is able to catch Vasilina, and just as he's about to deliver the final blow, the five amigos jump in and ruin it. This gives her the chance to catch and stop Ray, who was about to fire off his powerful rifle at the launch base. Man, if it wasn't for those old timers, world domination would have been diverted right there. Michael is able to successfully launch into space, and while he's there, encounters the satellite Dan drops down from every time. Seeing as it's in his way, he blows it up, meaning Dan is permanently grounded, which also means that the armor cannot restore itself anymore, and this also means that Van isn't able to recover himself when he gets into the armor, so his life is now in danger. The crew, while trying to figure out what to do about Dan, arrive at the launch base, only to meet it deserted. The entire place was abandoned the moment they launched Saudade into space. A huge waste if you ask me. While they explore the base, Wendy comes across a phone that just so happens to be ringing, and surprise surprise, the Claw is on the other end. Initially he was expecting Van to be on the other end of the call, but is equally joyed when he hears it's Wendy. And what does this man do? He asks her out on a date. And you know what she does? She actually goes to meet him in secret, and he shows up alone. The two have a moment to talk. The only reason Wendy showed up in the first place was because she wants answers, and part of her low-key believes in the man's dream. She wants to know why he's doing all of this and why he can't just let the world be if he's going to die anyway. This man sees himself as humanity's last hope. He's doing this out of the goodness of his heart and nothing more. He offers Wendy to join him, and she herself can't see him as a bad person anymore, but that doesn't mean she's going to join him. The Claw, disappointed, leaves. He says stuff like, "Don't change when you get older, and I only wish I had met you sooner." Bro is not beating the allegations. Wendy returns to base to tell everyone about her meetings with the Claw. They are shocked, with Van being the most pissed. She does tell him about Dan's destroyed satellite, so they come up with the amazing idea to shoot Dan and Van into space to dock into one of the other satellites belonging to the original 7 members. It takes them a whole week, but they are somehow able to build a rocket and get the base running enough to power the launch, and with help from Ray too. Before the day of the launch, the crew all gather around to take a group photo, and the next morning, Priscilla confesses her feelings to Van. But Van can't really give an answer since he's not exactly good with these kind of situations. That and his heart belongs to Elena. She makes him promise to give him an answer when he returns from space, and he promises to make it back. Wendy watched all of this and got jealous. This episode will be the last downtime the characters have before the final battle, and with nothing but their hopes riding on Van, they launch him into space. We cut to Michael, who is now on the moon. As he makes his way to the far side of the moon, he and us are shocked at what awaits him. The moon looks like this. This side of the moon is covered in some weird liquid-like substance that, according to the Claw, is a guidance system of sorts, and in the middle of it lies a spaceship. This ship came all the way from Earth to take refuge on the moon, and this is where the Claw came from. Yes, he was originally from Earth, but unfortunately the crew ended up killing each other when they got there, with him being the only survivor. This was the catalyst that made him realize that no matter how advanced humans became, they would never be able to move past their basic instincts, seeing them as inherently violent, and so he sets out on his plan to assimilate all of the new world, to create a world without conflict. Michael is able to use his armor to somehow fuse with the spaceship and the moon, and then proceeds to guide it towards the planet. As he makes his way towards the planet, he comes across one of the other original 7 satellites, and just like last time, he blows it up again. But this time around, Dan emerges from the rubble. Turns out it's been 10 days since he launched into space, which means he's been stuck in there for 10 days. And the moment he's released, he immediately goes after Michael. The two duke it out in space. And one of the cool things about this fight is how there is no sound from their clashes, which makes a lot of sense cause, well, they're in space. Their fight gets cut as they begin re-entering the planet's atmosphere, while Van gets swallowed up by the guidance system liquid. Meanwhile, back on the surface, the rest of the characters are making their way to the center of the island, but are stopped yet again by Vasilina and her army of automated armors. The fight proves to be a tough one for Ray because during the battle with the twins, he took a hit that affected his eyes, so now he's slowly turning blind, but that doesn't make him any less ferocious as he's able to take her down, albeit with his armor taking serious damage. He returns to the hover base, having a moment to talk with his brother as they make their way towards the enemy base. It's in these moments that Ray acknowledges his weakness, how he's been running away from the death of his wife, using revenge as a way to grieve, refusing to feel sadness. But once this is all over, once he kills the Claw, he'll be able to deal with her death again. He tells his younger brother to follow his own dreams and never let anyone get in his way, to which Joshua responds saying that his dream right now is just to be with his brother again. Ray, not wanting to put his brother in any more harm, knocks him out and takes him out of the hover base to protect him. He then proceeds to drive the hover base into enemy lines, intending to ram it straight into the Claw's armor that has linked up to the moon in order to enact the Time of Happiness plan. But as he does, Michael shows up to stop him, so Ray decides to blow up the base along with his armor, halting the enemy armor. This gives him some time to come face to face with the Claw. He fires off multiple shots but can't seem to hit the man due to his blindness. And the Claw, ever confident, just stands there believing he won't be dying now. Ray fires off his very last shot, but it doesn't hit the man, but instead makes its way right into the armor, causing a malfunction. And for the first time, we see the Claw actually lose his calm demeanor and look shocked. But unfortunately, it's at that very moment Ray is gunned down, bringing an end to his life. In his final moments, Ray is able to reunite with his wife. In his words, he finally awoke from a bad dream, closing the episode and bringing a tear to my eye. To Ray, from the moment he lost his wife, he's been existing in a bad dream. All he could ever think about was revenge, and even in the end, he wasn't able to take the life of the man who brought him so much pain. Ray is a character meant to mirror and at the same time contrast Van. While Van is a man quick to anger, rash, and moves without any real plans, Ray is calm and collected, tactical with every move he makes, and seems to always have shit figured out. The thing uniting them being their vengeance on lone wolf personality, hence why, despite sharing the same goal, they were never willing to work together. But where the two really differ is how they go about their journey. Van throughout his journey forms connections with people, albeit reluctantly, and slowly gets influenced by them. Sure, he may not be very expressive, but you can tell he does enjoy the time he spends with the crew. Ray on the other hand chose to stick to the path of a loner, even pushing away the one person ready to support him till the very end, his brother, aside, because he felt like this was a journey he had to take on alone. In the end, it was his loneliness that led to his undoing. But Ray's death wasn't in vain. The shots fired ended up delaying the Claw's plans by 47 minutes. And in those 47 minutes, Wendy, Carmen, Joshua, and the rest are able to sneak into the base and try to stop things however they can. Carmen is able to find the room where they plan to use those flowers from before to paralyze the masses and plans on blowing it up, but is stopped by and fights Fasolina. Joshua tries to crack their systems to disable their power source, and Van finally makes his triumphant return from space. But before he can face the Claw, he's gotta fight Michael. And for once, Van doesn't struggle against an original 7 and finishes him off with style. And so he finally gets to fight the Claw. While this is all going on, Carmen confronts Fasolina. To Carmen, she's just one person she cannot stand because of how honestly she lives her life. Despite being evil to the core, she can live however she wants, and Carmen is jealous of that because that's the kind of person she wants to be. So not only is she fighting her to save the world, she's also fighting her because she can't stand the person she is. On the other side, Michael makes his way back to the base where he is confronted by Wendy. She sees herself as the only one who can stop him now, pointing her gun at him, and begs him to stop. Throughout the story, she's been asking herself if it's possible for humans to be happy all the time, but now she's found her answer. Humans aren't meant to be happy all the time. If that was the case, life would have no real meaning, since everyone would be content, which would lead to stagnation. Humans are meant to exist with both happiness and sadness, and to force happiness onto other people is nothing more than psychological abuse. Michael doesn't want to listen to her, and so, using the only bullet she has held onto from the start of the series, she shoots him in the arm in an attempt to stop him. But Michael has his own dream he wants to achieve and won't let his sister get in his way. He tries to strangle his sister, but stops. Realizing what he was doing breaks him, and in the middle of it, the place begins to collapse, and without hesitation, he steps in to protect his sister. He knows he's gone off the deep end, but he also believes in the path he chose and won't stop. So the two siblings part ways, their dreams impossible to coexist. Back to Van versus the Claw. The fight is intense. Van can't seem to damage the Claw at all. He gets beat down over and over, but he doesn't stay down. Just when it seems like he's down for real, he has a flashback to his wife, and while screaming her name, unlocks a new power that he has never had before. This power is somehow harnessing the same energy the Claw's armor is using, which shouldn't be possible cause like, Dan's armor is pretty outdated. So yeah, Thanks to the power of plots, as well as some encouraging words from his allies, he cleaves right through the mech, opening the Claw's cockpit. Van walks up to the Claw, the man who ruined his life. This is it. This is the moment we've been building up to from the very beginning. And you know what he does? He doesn't kill him, because revenge is never worth it. It would have made him no different than the Claw. I'm just kidding with you. He slices that guy in fucking half. This was so cathartic, I cheered. This scene made everything worth it in the end. So with the Claw dead, all his followers immediately scramble. The floating island they were on begins to descend into the ocean floor, Faslina and Michael get crushed by falling debris, and all our characters are safe as they are able to make it out in one piece. We cut to them celebrating saving the world. Van wakes up. He doesn't join them in their celebrations as he immediately leaves, not even saying goodbye. Having accomplished his goal, he doesn't have any real plans anymore and sets out on what I can only guess is a soul-searching journey. He meets Joshua, who was able to set down to a new orbital satellite, which means Van's life won't be in danger anymore. They thank each other, but he's stopped by Wendy, who wants to see him one last time before they part ways. She asks him what he's going to do now, but he has no answers. But he'll figure it out somehow. They don't say goodbye to each other, no words are needed since they've reached a deeper level of understanding. And so, the two go their separate ways. We cut to a couple of years later. Wendy, now much older, is seen talking to a reporter. Seems she was recounting their adventures together but hasn't seen Van since the time they parted ways. But as luck would have it, the man himself randomly walks into a house looking for food and milk, ending the series on the two's shocking reunion. Gunsword was a great watch. It had a rough start but was able to pick itself up towards the end, making for a fun viewing experience. There was a lot that went into the anime and I tried my best to just focus on the main plot points, but even then, as you can tell by this video's runtime, there's still a lot to be said. But despite all that, I strongly recommend watching Gunsword just to get the full experience and enjoy the characters for yourself. The anime start wasn't great, but it managed to pick itself up towards the end and thankfully not rush its ending, finishing things on a definitive high note. However, as great as it was, it's not really an anime that has a legacy. Barely anyone talks about it. Hell, even the Mecha fans tend to forget its existence too, which is a shame because I think it's one that needs more people talking about it, but at the same time, I think it's fine the way it is. The anime came and did what it wanted to do and left with its head held high. At least it's been preserved through appearing in the Super Robot War series, which was actually how I came to know about its existence in the first place, which is pretty cool. But that'll be where I end this video. As always, this has been your very favorite slice of bread. Stay toasty.